But there was just a question about peace and how does theory U relate to the broader concept of peace? Can you comment on that?
That's a great question, particularly because I hardly ever get that. So I first need to write down the question because that's more interesting than the answer. So peace is more than the absence of war, right? So there's so positive peace is more than the absence of war. And what it really is, I believe, is the so my thesis advisor was the peace researcher Johan Galtung. So the guy who invented the theory of structural violence. What is structural violence? You have victims, but not direct. It's not a person. The perpetrator is not a person, but it's an economic structure, for example. So I think positive peace is essentially about reducing structural violence, transforming economic structures, and to some degree even maybe advancing also political or democratic structures in a way that generates more well-being for all, kind of, which is basically the topic of a network or of our community. And so if you think about positive peace, it has everything to do what we try to make happen in this community. When you look at the absence of peace today, it is, in part through direct violence, of course, that needs to be addressed. And there is, I mean, this whole, another area that I find very interesting, but know very little about is that trauma, right? So, but I know that there is a number of people who use theory U-related concepts around trauma, because trauma is basically a freeze reaction towards something, towards an injury. And then the healing is basically creating a container, right? So it's, when you think about it in terms of the U process, it's all about, so when you deal with historical trauma, when you deal with structural violence, I remember, so as a German being in Namibia, to, near the first workshop was one of the sites where the first Holocaust in the 20th century was committed. So when you go through these, when you deal with these historical traumas and deal with groups kind of where these things have happened or are present, then the key is to create the container, right? To create a healing container in a really skillful way. So in other words, it's not speeding up the process, but you need to slow down the process so that kind of some of that can come back to the surface and can be reintegrated in the larger system. So personally, I'm not that much directly involved in this kind of work as of yet, but I have been told by a number of colleagues that there is a very significant relationship, and I think it's a very interesting area to explore more to. And whoever, I mean, asked the question, I would be, maybe after the session, I would, if you're more connected to that or have practical experience, I would love to stay in exchange around that and to learn from whatever the experiences are.